alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ba'd. So you have been introduced to the individual Ahmed Deedat, rahimahullah ta'ala. Now, there are many people that I could have chosen. I went through a number of names. However, Ahmed Deedat was one of the first people that I wanted to speak about for a number of reasons. Not only did he have a profound effect on myself and helped me on my way and my journey to Islam, but I have seen the impression that, or the legacy that he has left, that each and every one of us, either directly or indirectly, has benefited from. Now, what made him stand out? What made him the individual that we know him to be? And I was thinking about this. I was trying to draw some examples. So, in 1989, Mike Tyson and Frank Bruno had their first fight. This was the champion of the United Kingdom, the European hope, to take out the one and only Iron Mike. They went for the weigh-in, and sometimes you find the weigh-in actually lasts longer than the fight. Anyhow, Frank Bruno gave a little bit more than the fight than we actually thought. Anyhow, the fight was won at the weigh-in. The fight was already won at the weigh-in. When Mike Tyson stood there at about 5'11", whatever height he is, so he's around 5'11", he's not that tall for a boxer. And he stood there in front of Frank Bruno, who towered over him. And you could see the fear in Frank Bruno's face. By the time they got to the ring, Frank Bruno, you could see, just wanted to get out of there. Lo and behold, just a few rounds later, it was all over. So the fight was won before they actually began. Before the bell rang, Mike Tyson had won the fight. And when there was a rematch just 6-7 years later, similarly, the fear that was in his face and in most of the opponents of Mike Tyson, the opponent was already defeated. Similarly, I find Ahmed Deedat, rahimahullah, he'd already won the debate before he had spoken with anybody. Now, what made him special? Was he a graduate of a university, an Islamic university? What gave him this stature amongst others? What made him supersede all of those other great Christian scholars? Well, he was born in India in 1918, very simple background. His father traveled to South Africa for a better life. He then traveled over about the age of 8 or 9 years old, followed his father, and just about had the ability to stay in South Africa. Now, when he went there, his mother tongue being Gujarati, went into a school and he's speaking English. At the time of apartheid, militant missionaries spreading Christianity in Africa, he learned English in about 6 months and became the top of his class at around the age of 10 or 11. Then his father sent him to high school. After a short while, he was taken up because his father couldn't afford it. So, as norm at that time, he was just sent to go and get a job, like anybody else. You see the plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're looking at this. And he was given a job, one of the jobs he had was working actually in a library, opposite to a missionary church. In this particular church, they were being trained. The Christians were being trained how to debate with Muslims, how to put doubts in the minds of Muslims. So often, the Christians who had studied in this church, that they would walk into Ahmed Deedat's library and say, did you know that Islam was spread by the sword? Did you know that Muhammad had loads of wives? Bringing about all these shubuhat and doubts. And at that time, he found it very difficult, and many Muslims found it very difficult to answer these questions. So, what to do? He went to the basement one day, cleaning up the basement, newspapers, books, magazines, everything, only to come across an old book that had been printed in 1915, a book that was actually older than him. He looked at the book and it was called Izharul Haqq, or Izharul Haqq, the bringing to the light of the truth, or making the truth clear. So he looked at this book, and when he read through it, it was actually a Muslim making clear or giving arguments how to speak with Christians. from an Islamic perspective, this is something that immediately he had a love for. And at this particular stage, I want us to just really think about ourselves. That sometimes we come across subjects, we come across topics, we come across many things, we spend a short amount of time on it, and then we move on. And then we spend time on a course, and then I move on. Is there anything or something that you're studying that you can say you've been studying for 5 years or 10 years or 15 years? Something that you can say that you specialize in? Or is it something that you're just constantly jumping to, different things and you don't really have a takhassus, you don't have a speciality? It is very important for us as Muslims that you find your speciality, that you find that what you are good at, not what you're being pushed into or what other people think is good to do now. What's it going to be like for you in 10 years' time? Try to find something that you like, something that will benefit you and will benefit the Muslims. Now, for many of us, maybe we've already made those choices in terms of education or we're about to make those choices. It's never too late. But choose something which you enjoy. Choose something that you like so that you can excel. And that you can benefit the ummah. Because we want the ummah to benefit. We want the Muslim to be the very best. Why should we satisfy ourselves and say, well, somebody else is going to do it? Maybe 99% of the Muslims, they're going to say that. Somebody else is going to do it. That's probably what it is like at the moment, because somebody else is going to do it. Those Muslims or the Muslim eras where we were successful, they didn't rely on other people to do the job. They relied on, after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, themselves to make sure that if the ummah is to progress and to reach the levels that we want it to, I have to be part of that. Now, Ahmed Deedat, rahimahullah, was one of those people. He found what he liked. He found that this is something that the Muslims, that they need. In Africa, millions of Muslims are being Christianized, turning away from their religion, at the very least, have a very loose affiliation to Islam. So he began reading and reading, self-taught, completely self-taught. And you'll find, and I just read this today actually, this was concerning 1,200 extremely rich people, millionaires or billionaires. The vast majority of them never studied at university or went through the system. If you look at Bill Gates, if you look at Steve Jobs, what system did they go through? Warren Buffett, what systems did they go through? These people, if you look very closely to their lives, they are, in essence, if you like, self-taught. i.e. that there was something within them that was very beloved. And they took that route and wasn't going to go on any other route, that they stuck with that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them what they have. So Ahmed Deedat, rahimahullah, began learning and studying the religion and studying the Bible and studying the Quran until, let's say, he's around 22 years old now, okay, in the early 1940s, he began teaching. And he had very, very simple lectures like Muhammad, alayhi salam, the messenger of peace. Very simple muhadarat or lectures that he would give. Then a few years passed, and in the 1950s, a missionary came to Durban, South Africa, which is where he was based. And they used to have Bible classes on a large scale for the Christians. So on one occasion, after a few months had passed, an individual called Mr. Fairfax, who was a white revert to Islam, attended one of the classes. And at the end of the class, he said to everybody, whoever would like to study the Bible from an Islamic perspective, I will be having classes at so-and-so place at so-and-so time, from a Muslim perspective. So Ahmed Deedat, rahimahullah, he went with a number of students and they began studying from Mr. Fairfax. This carried on for a number of months, likewise, until one week Mr. Fairfax didn't turn up. He didn't turn up. So everyone's looking at each other, what do we do? They sat, waited, nobody turned up. Week number 2, again they came, again no show from Mr. Fairfax. The third week, and then he began to think, Ahmed Deedat, rahimahullah, that people are going to go. This is a really beneficial class. At the end of the third week, when Mr. Fairfax didn't turn up, he said, what do you think? Or would you mind if I began teaching what Mr. Fairfax taught. So they agreed. And this is where he began teaching people. And he's carried on for a number of years, giving da'wah in Durban and so on. Until, if we can move forward a few years now, into the 70s, where he'd become quite famous in South Africa. But then he got an invitation to Saudi Arabia. And there were some people who recognized the good work that Ahmed Deedat was doing in South Africa. And then when he went there, or somebody hadn't turned up for one of the lectures, and they said, well, why don't you let Ahmed Deedat, stand up and give a small lecture? And he said, well, he thought to himself, who am I? And a lot of other people thought, well, yes, and who is he? We don't know who he is. Where's he come from? Anyhow, the opportunity was given to him, and he spoke. He spoke, and he amazed the people the way he spoke, with such confidence, with such clarity, with such eloquence, in English, even though Gujarati was his mother tongue, he'd learned English at a very good level. So he was given the opportunity now, on an international level, to start teaching and propagating Islam. You only need to look historically, that during this time, Muslims were really uneducated about how to deal with the arguments that were posed to Muslims. Very much like now, when you're given awkward questions about Islam, many Muslims just don't know how to answer that, don't know what to say. They bring about shubuhat. Even more so at that time, where there was no internet, there's literature is very few and far between. What people, who can we go back to ask? So it caused a lot of confusion amongst the Muslims. This was the one ray of light now, that Muslims now had the opportunity to start defending themselves. And not only to defend themselves, but to go on the attack, to start debating with people. And here we had an individual who, with his charisma, the way he spoke, his manner, his confidence, the Muslims thought that now had somebody to rally around. So he went and gave debates. He went to the United States and he went to United Kingdom. Now, United States being the very epicenter of evangelical Christianity, Ahmed Deedat said, I would like to debate Jimmy Swaggart. Jimmy Swaggart. People said, do you know who Jimmy Swaggart is? This televangelist who has millions of followers, and his mere presence on the podium is second to none in the United States. We think you should reconsider really debating such a high-profile individual. Because previously Ahmed Deedat, rahimahullah, had dealt with, if you like, people who are on a very, very low level in terms of their Christianization of people. Some pastors, some bishops, some priests. This, on the other hand, was something very different. It wasn't necessarily about facts. It wasn't about being clear as black and white. This is dealing with the personality. Going into the lion's den and dealing with the personality, what it is to be a televangelist. Whether they're talking the truth or not, the mere presence and the words that they choose can be like magic over the people. Even a very close person to Ahmed Deedat said to him, we advise you really not to go. This guy, Jimmy Swaggart, is dangerous. And you have done so much good work, you've established yourself as a good caller to Islam. You have given us the platform that we need. Don't let that just go now to disappear. Because if you go there, and if he embarrasses you, he embarrasses all the work and destroys all the good work that you have done. He said, no. He was so confident what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given to him, that he said that when I speak to people, I'll be given an hour. At the very least, I'll be given 45 minutes. I will be able to present my case. It's not like a 2 or 3 minute video where you may be cut off and your words misconstrued or misunderstanding. No, I'll be given that time and I will be able to present my case. So Ahmed Deedat, he went there, and the videos are very readily available. He more than can be imagined became a victor in that particular debate. Not only the debate, because that was only one part of winning the battle, if you like, but the Q&A, the questions and answer, that was something which to behold, to see an individual so sharp in dealing with the questions of the people. Of course, you have a 45-minute presentation. Nobody will interrupt you. You can present as you like, how you like. But when it comes to questions and answers, you may find some very, very sharp people with some very, very sharp questions. Even the speaker, your opponent, may want to start mentioning things to you which you didn't prepare for. But this is where really Ahmed Deedat, he stood out. Not only as a deliverer and calling people to Islam and talking about what it means to be a Christian. At Q&A time, he really showed the level of study and memorization and the tawfiq, the success that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to him. How many a time that a questioner would come, because Q&A time is always a short time, and they would always restrict people to one question only. The questioner comes and he says, and it's an opportunity for him to or her to start reading passages from the Bible. And he says, I would like to read this passage from the Bible. He says, no need to read it, I've memorized it. Just tell me the reference and ask me the question. How many times that would be done? He knew the passage. And he said, you know what, not only I know the passage, I know the different versions that exist, and I memorized all those versions, I know it better than you. Now, at times, people may say, he came across a little arrogant. He came across a little coarse, a little harsh, maybe at times. I mean, nobody's perfect. When you're talking and you're in a situation where there's thousands of people sitting in front of you, how will you react? How will you respond? Maybe there at times. However, if you understand the individual, if you understand how things work, then you will understand how sometimes this approach was really needed. I want to mention 3 incidents where it was just amazing how he tackled an extremely difficult situation. One of them was with the debate of Jimmy Swaggart. And Jimmy Swaggart said, you know, just as we have welcomed you in here to the United States of America, we have treated you as an esteemed guest. We've allowed you to come to the lands to address the vast majority of Christians. We would like for us to visit you in Mecca. We want to come to Mecca and have the same debate. Almost 9 times out of 10, Ahmed Deedat, you see him running to the microphone. He's running to the microphone because his answer is there ready. And he says, you know, number 1, I am prepared to visit 4 more cities in the United States, Madison Square Gardens, whatever cities and places you want, go to 4 more. And on top of that, I'll give you $10,000. I'll pay you in your pocket from us. We'll pay for the venue, we'll pay for everything, and we'll give you $10,000. He is prepared to debate Jimmy Swaggart or any televangelist in any place in America. This is how confident he was. And he said, secondly, you know, I'm not the governor of Mecca. I'm not the one who gives permission for people to come in and out of Mecca. However, you know, when I came to the United States of America, I had to fill in a visa form. And you have conditions. So he said, you know what, similarly, when I go to Mecca, or anybody goes to Mecca, Saudi Arabia, they have a visa form and they have conditions as well. And one of those conditions, quite simply, is that you say, La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah. If you can say that, marhaban bikum, then you are welcome to come to Mecca. This is one example. Another example is that he had just debated Professor Floyd Clark. And it was talking about, was Christ crucified? Was Christ crucified? This is the first video or debate that I watched with Ahmed Deedat. He simply just used the Bible and proved that Jesus was not crucified. He told the story through the Bible, using their verses, their revelation, ala za'mihim, according to their claim, and proved that Jesus actually, you know what, he wasn't crucified. Amazing. I couldn't believe that somebody would use the Bible to prove that Jesus was not crucified. This was the second incident I was amazed by. The third one is that in that very same debate, there was a Q&A at the time, at the very end, and the Q&A is always the best time. There was a guy, his name is Anis Shurush. He was an Arab Israeli. And he came, and Ahmed Deedat, by the way, rahimahullah, didn't speak Arabic. He didn't speak Arabic. He knew a few words. He knew a few ayat. So Anis Shurush, he came, And he said, does not the Quran contradict itself in that Allah says concerning Jesus, alayhi salam, and he said the verse in Arabic. He didn't translate it. He just said the verse in Arabic, where he said, وَالسَّلَامُ عَلَيَّ يَوْمَ وُلِدْتُ وَيَوْمَ أَمُوتُ وَيَوْمَ أُبْعَثُ حَيًّا. Just said the verse. Ahmed Deedat, as usual, he's running to the microphone. He said, and so calmly put his hands like this, and he said, our compatriot, our friend, has asked a question, and he resaid the verse. He resaid the verse just to make sure everybody understood what was said. Because the vast majority of people don't speak Arabic. What's the contradiction here? What's the point that's being made? So, Ahmed Deedat said, you have quoted the verse concerning Jesus, peace be upon him, when he says, and peace be upon me the day that I was born, and on the day that I die, and on the day that I will be risen again. Anis Shurosh had claimed that here the Quran was saying that Jesus is saying the day that I have, or rather the peace be upon me, the day I was born, and the day that I died. He had said the Arabic but translated it incorrectly. Ahmed Deedat said, you have said the verse wrong. It's not the day that I died, Yawmu mittu, the day I died, but rather it is the day amut, the day that I will die. This showed, at least to me, understanding this, a very deep understanding of these issues. It wasn't his language, but he had the ability to refute him right there and then. So what's his legacy? His legacy is something which, subhanallah, we only wish and desire for. The amount of booklets and writings that he had. One particular book comes to my mind now. He had something called the Bible, the Combat Kit. The Combat Kit. This Combat Kit was like a very small pamphlet, about 60 or 70 pages. He told you what to do with it. He said, you go buy your Bible, and you get this Combat Kit, and you stick it in the first page. Okay? And then you start, all the points that are mentioned in the Combat Kit, you start underlining and start building up your arguments. Okay? About 15 years ago or so, so many Muslims took up this, and they went down to speakers' corners like a pack of wolves. They went down there, said, right, we're going to take the Christians out. And, lo and behold, at the end of the day, when it starts to get busy around 10 or 11 in the morning, and then by 4 or 5 in the afternoon, the brothers say, yeah, what did you do? I just took out 7 Christians today. It's like, but I only got this book this week. You don't know anything, but he just stood there with his Bible, with the Combat Kit, saying, argument, contradiction, contradiction, contradiction. And then what? You left all these people confused. All these people saying, okay, you confused me, you've demolished my religion. Now what? That's okay. You're dal, you're misguided, you're daleen. It's like, brother, this is not how to give da'wah. This is not the point of this Combat Kit. Yes, to make clear their mistakes, but you have to give them, once the door has been opened, their heart has been opened, now is the time to teach them the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Teach them the truth. And this is something that you find with Ahmed Deedat, rahimahullah, in his da'wah. That yes, he made clear all the contradictions and the mistakes inside the Bible, but at the same time, he would always quote verses where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells them, تَعَالَوْا إِلَى كَلِمَةٍ سَوَاءٍ بَيْنَنَا وَبَيْنَكُمْ. Come to a common terms, to a common word between us, that we only worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is something we should take from him. That it's not about knowing the opposition inside out, okay, and then taking them out and then leaving them. This is not what Ahmed Deedat came with, rahimahullah. But he came with a call that to explain the differences or the contradictions that may exist in another religion, but you yourself to be certain about your own belief, about the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to deliver that in a way where people will then embrace Islam. If we think, what have I achieved? What direction am I going in? What have I put forth for this deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? When I meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what excuse, what one thing can I say that I have done? This is something I think really we all have the opportunity to do on a time like this, to take just a few minutes out and think, yeah, you know what direction am I going in? And what really have I put forth for the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy upon us all. Barakallahu feekum. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.